Thank you and welcome back to our Network Future. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome the chair of our next panel, Matt Warman, MP, who's going to be moderating what comes next, breakthrough technology for the telecom sector. And he is going to be exploring the next evolution of digital technology, how telcos can take advantage of these opportunities and some of those sort of future opportunities, what's coming down the line. So, Matt, over to you. Thanks very much.
Lovely, and thank you, Matt, from one Matt to another. We've got, as you said, a great panel here, I think, to talk about what is an immensely wide-ranging topic. This concept of what comes next could capture anything from certainly from software to hardware, but from everything, be that AI, be that diversification, be that a whole host of things. And one of the challenges that I think government faces is drawing all of those strands together in a way that is both genuinely coherent, but also explicable to the industry and to the public. And I'm sure when you heard from Julia earlier on this morning, then you heard a little bit of what the ambition is for that. But without further ado, I will we'll run through the panel, and we'll give each person a bit of an opportunity to set out their stall, and then obviously keen to take some questions and do something that's a bit more free flowing. We've got Stefano from Mavenir, we've got Steve from Spirent, we've got Abel from Airspan, Francesca from Colt, and Raja from Red Hat. I'm going to go through people in order that I can see them on my screen. I don't know if that is the same for everyone else, but that means if we start off with Stefano, and then we will come to Abel, to Raja, and then to Steve and Francesca. So Stefano, if I hand over to you, and then just a couple of minutes, and then we will run through the panel and hopefully enter into a interesting discussion. But thank you, Stefano.
Thank you very much. And my name is Stefano Cantarelli. I work for Mavenir, and we are kind of known as building the future of network with single automated and cloud-native software. And within this, I have somehow summarized everything we represent. For us, the software is extremely important, and the future is really about software and virtualization. So what is really is happening in the industry, and specifically in the UK, is in a very interesting trend where we have been, as a Mavenir, participated to a lot of the activities in these last 2 years. We are in the Sonic Lab. We have been hearings and consultations for all this diversification of the supply chain. And what we really take out of what is happening and a transformation that is happening in the UK, and to be honest, worldwide, this is not just UK, but UK has definitely taken a very strong position in this space, are really three things. First one, of course, is that there are great opportunities in UK for new technology to happen, and specifically for virtualization technology to take over and transform the telco business as it has done for IT many years ago. And specifically then for radio technology with Open RAN, you've heard a lot about it. But as I said, as well for the whole network in general, like core and so on, with a lot of transformation in the virtualization space. The second aspect is that these same things is actually boost the ecosystem. We have heard many times about what ecosystem means for open networks or for software virtualization and so on. And the openness really brings the competition and the ecosystem with many more people, many more alternatives, not just the usual one or two. And the third things, I believe that UK has really given a lot of influence worldwide. A lot that we have seen in the European countries where UK has really led some of the concept in openness and pushing the envelope in that space. So that's really what we represent. That's really what we think is great about this new technologies for the futures. And we really hope that in this panel, we'll be able to discuss and respond to more questions to our audience.
Lovely. Thank you, Stefano. I'm sure we will come on to openness in greater detail later on. But let's hand over next to Abel to talk to us, I suspect, on a slightly different angle on similar themes. But Abel, over to you.
Hi, thank you very much for having me. My name is Abel Mayal. Abel is also fine in the English.
Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. I'm used to Abel or Abel. So I am the SVP of Technology and Marketing at Espen. Espen is an American-run vendor. So we do the full set of parts of the radio. We define ourselves as disruptive run vendor because we like to change the deployment models with our innovation in our radios. We were very successful in 4G with more than 1 million cells deployed worldwide. We also starting with our 5G very successfully. We have already tens of thousands of radios deployed in Japan. And we're based in the US, but we have a very long story in the UK. Actually, we have our first customer in 1990s, so 21 years ago, was 31 years ago, was 21 years ago, was BT. And we have an office in Slough with 100 employees. We also established our 5G UK Innovation Lab. And we're planning to increase the headcount in our offices to double it. So we are hiring a lot of software engineers. We are very much active in the UK with DCMS. We are part of many projects. We are working in Millbrook Connected Vehicles, Port of Bristol Logistics. We are part of the 5G Encode project, also in the SWIFT project. And also we were part of this Frank initiative. So I'm very excited to be here to talk about 5G and the UK strategy.
Great, thank you. So obviously, two similar players in some ways. Red Hat, a very different player. Raja, over to you.
Thank you, Matt. Hi all. Good morning. My name is Raja Chandok. I'm the solution architect / technology evangelist for EMEA Telco at Red Hat, based in London. My key focus area in Red Hat, especially around network function virtualization and containers going towards the 5G, which involves closely working with the service providers, the NAPs, system integrator, ISVs to progress the NFV agenda in the industry. Special focus on disaggregated RAN. I also drive emerging tech in open source world to address our enterprise customer needs, keeping in mind the agility, operational efficiency, and security, which is paramount across all our product portfolio. For people who are not much aware of Red Hat is an enterprise software company with an open source development model. We started with open source project from community. We create them, combine various software projects into software distribution, which are community focused, and ultimately we deliver them as commercial projects to our enterprise customers. We also bring customer needs into equation. That means they have a representation within the community. And we all know open source is the de facto innovation engine these days in the industry. UK diversification policy, from my point of view, is an excellent step towards bringing more innovation and giving opportunity to the smaller players in this area to showcase that product. We have been working with various RAN providers, whether you talk about the biggies, Ericsson, Nokia, or you talk about the NECs and other players like Basel. So we are doing a lot of stuff with them. We are actively participating in the TIP and the ORAN alliances. So looking forward to a discussion today in this panel. Thank you.
Super, thank you. And then over to Steve from a Spirent perspective.
Thanks, Matt, and hi everyone. I'm Steve Douglas. I head up strategy for Spirent Communications. We're a UK listed company. We're one of the industry leaders in the test, measurement, and assurance space within the communication industry. So pretty much everybody in the industry works with us when they're testing their communication infrastructure, systems or services. And we're engaged today in over about 1,400 global engagements in 5G alone, but we cover the breadth of the communication sector. And where we're focusing a lot of our effort today and is not only helping our customers as they start to roll out new communication technologies like 5G, but gradually move them on the pathway as they start to evolve them. So helping them now move to the standalone architecture with the new 5G core network coming in so they can enable new services for the industrial sectors, starting to look at the early adoption of Open RAN and making sure it's robust for commercial deployments, and starting to look at how they can also embrace the cloud ecosystem in a broader way, working with with partners like Amazon or Microsoft, and they can exploit them within their networks. But more and more, we're also focusing on the longer term evolution as well. So being a part of our business, the testing side of it, it's not just about making sure current systems are conformant or certified. It's also providing people playgrounds or sandboxes to start evolving out towards the future 6G systems as well. So we work very closely with a number of stakeholders in that space, such as the defense organizations, to really help them through a transformation of how they could use these types of technologies and things like artificial intelligence, how they could use more than just the cellular communication systems, but the non-terrestrial networks and also the submariner networks as well, to create a more holistic, ubiquitous set of connectivity for the future. And we pretty much touch all those fields.
Thank you. And last but not least, by any means, Francesca, over to you for the Colt perspective.
Thank you. I'm Francesca. I'm the Emerging Technology Director at Colt. Colt is a connectivity provider for businesses, and our connectivity services are based on our IQNet, which is a fiber-based 100 gigabit per second network, fully virtualized and with AI capabilities. So what we are seeing in terms of trends in UK, but also worldwide, from a service provider perspective, we're seeing that we're moving on with the transformation program to become really a full digital service provider. We have digitalized the network through SDN and AV. We have digitalized the operation through automation. We have digitalized the services, cloudified the services through marketplace and self-service portal. And what we are doing now, which is something that also Stefano was mentioning, it's really digitalizing the business layer to really enable new business positioning, new business model, working with a broader partner ecosystem through an API-driven network that really enable the connectivity to be bundled with the capability across the ICT stack and move towards solution selling. From the enterprise perspective, what we're seeing from our customer, they are expecting us to offer both connectivity and security services together. And we're also seeing that they believe connectivity now should be part of strategic initiative, being, for example, cloud migration, and the pandemic has accelerated that not only for non-critical application, but also for business critical application, but also for digital transformation program where 5G and Edge have a key role. And I'll be talking later on this. Thanks.
Lovely, thank you. So lots to get our teeth into there. I suppose sort of as an opening question, and this is sort of interesting for me partly because I used to be in charge of it and I'm now on the other side of the fence, I suppose. But obviously there's been a big diversification policy shift in the UK in the last couple of years. I wonder what your sort of perspective is on how that has changed what your respective businesses have had to do, and how it changes the opportunities and how it changes what the challenges are, because obviously there's much more awareness of that diversification requirement than there has been for some have been previously, but it is also not a sort of it's not a straightforward path both to explain to customers or to explain to sort of why it needs to happen. I'll pick on people because that's the nature of digital panels, but if anyone would like to leap in first, then do say. But maybe Francesca, is that one for you in some ways to kick off with?
Yeah, I think this activity, this initiative of diversification has brought a lot of opportunity and few challenges as well. The key benefits that I see is to remove vendor lock-in. because vendor lock-in is a barrier to innovation. And it has been a mission impossible, really, to remove vendor lock-in. And I talk from experience where, no matter whether you were compliant to 3GPP, whether you do PlugFest initiative to show the interoperability, whether you have an API management platform to enable also synergy at operational level, you would always lose on the commercial part because the incumbents could really leverage on their business case that they already have. So, and I think this is a great achievement. But we're also seeing that this diversification has also facilitated and speed up the rollout of Open RAN with initiative like the Sonic to really enable the interoperability, initiative like Frank to drive the adoption, but also the neutral RAN led by NEC to develop the ecosystem, and then being able to offer best of breed type of approach and also flexible deployment scenario, which is what we need, especially for deployment. If you would think like rural, so rural deployment, I think that has also helped to reduce the digital divide because it facilitated the economics where in all those cases where traditional architecture wouldn't really make the business case. So I see lots of benefits. Of course, there are some challenges as well, because as we diversify and the network becomes more disaggregated and more heterogeneous, there is the need to put everything together and to be able to deliver end-to-end SLA with service assurance. So system integrator are going to have a great role on this.
Yes, great role, and also possibly a very lucrative role in some of this. Raja, you were nodding vigorously at some of that. What are your thoughts?
In fact, what Francesca mentioned, no vendor lock-in. So that is the beauty of open source software. And with Red Hat, we have been working closely with a lot of our customers to understand their business needs and also involving various vendors to test their solution on top of our platform. So basically, we are not the application provider. We are more of a platform provider. So NEC, for example, NEC has certified their CNFs on top of our Kubernetes platform, which is OpenShift. Rakuten is another great example where we are part of the ecosystem with our products. So supply chain flexibility is key when you talk about the diversification. And that's where we cannot rely on only the big companies because a lot of small companies are coming up with innovative solutions. So I would say excellent point. And on no vendor lock-in and diversification, from my point of view, is a great step for UK.
You are on mute. So.
Yeah,
sorry, it's inevitable to happen at some point, wasn't it? Steve, I wonder if you have any thoughts, because it obviously is that, in a sense, a part of this challenge is how do we achieve what both Francesca and Roger have talked about, but how do we do it quickly as well? Because there is a big government impetus to try and make sure it happens sooner rather than later, isn't there?
Yeah, there absolutely is, James, and I think there's two sides to it. I mean, I think it is, it's a great initiative to stimulate innovation in our industry, but there is two sides to it. There's certainly a technology side of it which needs to be fast tracked. How do we get these new technologies, these new vendors to parity so that they can be used within our networks? But I think what we're seeing really on the ground level is an area that has slightly been overlooked a little bit, and that's actually the operationalization of it within our, say, service provider community. It's great that they have this opportunity to have the new vendors and the diversity in there, but if their procedures and practices aren't in place to correctly deal with it, and what I mean is, operational teams aren't geared up for multi-vendors coming in like this. Their procurement processes have not been focused in that way. So there's a lot of change in that area has to also come about. And we're working quite closely with a lot of our customers to sort of try to break those barriers as well, because I think we certainly can solve and accelerate the technology challenges that are, that potentially are out there and get them to parity. But if their operational procedures don't align to that, then it becomes slightly more a longer term challenge. And I think this is where automation technologies are starting to come into. We're already seeing this in areas like the new 5G core network, which is starting to be brought in for the move to standalone 5G. Where, I mean, in essence, that is the first phase of having a multi-vendor environment on a multi-potential stack or cloud environment. And they're learning from that how to actually bring that into their processes, how it can be rapidly validated, how it can be rapidly rolled out. And I think we're going to see a similar sort of type of activity coming about as we start to really adopt Open RAN, where they're going to look to leverage not just system integrators, but automation technologies, which are going to allow suppliers like Mavenir, like Airspan, to have their technology rapidly brought into the into the operators' environments in a safe and agile way. And I think that's what a big emphasis you're going to see over the next few years.
And you've provided the perfect segue into both Stefano and Abel to talk about. There are, I think, really big opportunities for companies like yours here. But what are the challenges into actually? This is an area where it's easy to talk about what could come next, but it feels like there are some pretty obvious barriers that are not helping firms like yours to actually make that breakthrough. So, Stefano, do you want to go first, and then Abel?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I agree with basically everything has been said so far. I'd like to add that in the UK we have seen a real catch up and a real spread of these new technologies, especially in Open RAN, in the private networks and in the neutral host. And they are almost, we can say, greenfield operator, greenfield companies, which of course have no legacy or very little legacy. And as such, there is no doubt that when they look at the technology, they prefer the new technology versus the legacy one, because it's the future. And we have talked about virtualization, about automation, and so on. That's all the reason why. And the openness, which allows as well people to be mixed up. Well, instead, we all know from those who come from the industry that until today, deployment of mobile networks has always been in areas where they have to have the same vendor for areas, because otherwise there are some problems. So that's one aspect. We have seen, though, and this is probably the answer to your question, Matt, the major difficulties are still in the big service provider, the big ones. And the reason I think it's very simple to understand. They have a much larger legacy. They have a very strong lock-in, and that creates also a need in the operator themselves for a big change of mindset. And change of mindset, we know, is not an easy thing. I've been in Vodafone, I've been in O2, I've been in several places, and I know that it's not easy to change that mindset. So that's what it is, really. I don't think it's a question of readiness of the technology. Technology is ready. We can say that maybe it requires being more maturity. That's no problem, because maturity comes with millions and millions of self-deployed, as Abel was saying. So that is not the barrier. The main barrier is about the mindset of the people, the mindset of the operator. An operator have been always deploying in the same way, and they find it difficult to think that they can deploy with a new mindset, with a new way, like, for example, densifying sites rather than just putting everything in their existing cell grid and trying to radiate from few sites with the maximum possible power. So I think this is really what it is. It's a question of time. I don't see it as a problem. It's just a question of time. And, I think we will be there when the time is going to happen, and we'll continue to push. But we have seen also the CSP starting to move in that direction.
Interesting, and interesting maybe to talk a little bit in a minute about what government could be doing to seek to accelerate some of that, because certainly when I was doing it, as you say, Stefano, it is definitely it is a challenge that will be solved over time, and government's sort of main thing to try and do is basically speed up time. So how we do that is interesting. Abel, any thoughts?
Yeah. Well, we believe that diversification is crucially important for the UK, right? We are Airspan. We adopted this Open RAN architecture in our products. We believe this is the way forward, and basically, I can summarize it maybe in three aspects. What is the added value of this diversification? First of all, to accelerate the rollouts of 5G and also bring faster innovation. When you open the market for new vendors, right, what you're doing is like you're bringing the price down, not also because of this competition, but also because of this Open RAN architecture, right? Has been published for the only commercial network using Open RAN fully virtualized in Japan, Rakuten. They announced like 35% savings, right, in capex and OPEX. Second point will be increased security and resilience. It's something that I think every government is very interested in that. So the UK, if they want to improve the security and resilience, is increasing this supply chain diversification is also a key part. First, because of the technology, is more secure, Open RAN, having these transparent interfaces, right? But also, again, you don't have these these 2-3 main players, right, driving the agenda on security. And the third, and I think very key point is that having this increase on the supply chains, what you do is like you open up and increase the number of higher skilled jobs in the UK. We have seen that, basically on the front in this funding for R&D competition. If you see the number of consortia companies that were involved, for example, it's normal that you have the RAN vendors and the parts of the networks, the core vendors. But then you see, for example, universities, you see SMEs, right, that do like small pieces of software that can be integrated with this new type of architecture, this Open RAN. You can see also hardware vendors that's a specific part of the radio. This is something that is not possible when you keep working with these traditional vendors. So we see that this is 3 points why this is important. And, adding on these challenges that we're facing, I agree totally with Stefano. But I think in order to encourage MNOs to adopt this new technology, and I understand their challenges and their legacy, is to, for example, and I'm following up with your comment, Matt, about what the government can do. I think that it's crucial to do like an urban trial deployment. In the UK, having a real Open RAN network in a small cluster, right, to really prove to the MNOs that this is a reality, that the performance is good or even better than the traditional deployments, right? So this is something that I think we should try to start working on it as soon as possible. We also believe that creating more pro-innovation regulatory environment should also help to MNOs to move forward with with Open RAN. We saw in this diversification task force report, there was some statements about trying to set some percentage of budget from MNOs to be used in new technologies like Open RAN, right? Also maybe introduce provenance standards for equipment to know the origins of where the equipment come. For example, we are ESPN, we are US, UK office company, and we don't produce, for example, we don't manufacture in China. And also to provide some incentives to MNOs, right, to adopt this Open RAN. So I think this is the things that really can do the government to speed up the process. Also, to take these accelerated spending decisions to move forward all these initiatives for this rapid adoption of Open RAN.
Yeah, you've sort of preempted my next question in some ways, which was going to be by identifying a couple of things that government could do. I wonder if there are sort of some reflections on what is it that if you guys were collectively designing Frank or Frank 2.0 or whatever it might be, what are the changes that you would make that would seek to address some of the challenges that we've been talking about? And what's maybe do you feel like there are programs that government has not yet cottoned onto that we could be using to try and supercharge any of this stuff? Steve, I wonder if you've got any thoughts.
I think, just to follow up, what was mentioned there. I mean, I strongly believe actually that, the big benefit of Open RAN and where we should be focused around the innovation side of it. I think that's really the holy grail opportunity, and it's convincing the service providers around that. Now, it's not just about convincing them that it's able for innovation. I think it's about having an innovation ecosystem, and that's what actually is going to be required. I mean, if you look at a big service provider today here in the UK, the type of network rollout or radio network rollout that they're going to need to deploy to cover, the new types of industrial verticals, meeting their rural requirements. The traditional radio was a very costly and complex thing to do. by bringing Open RAN into that there, it gives you that types of levels of flexibility, but then it needs the innovation around it, because how do you manage a very, very now diverse radio environment? And I think there's a huge opportunity here for us to try to foster ecosystems of developers who are developing that type of innovation, whether it's dynamically optimizing the radio, whether it's looking at energy efficiency, which I think will be a huge topic area going forward as we densify the networks. And this is the beauty what the Open RAN system potentially has, but we need an ecosystem there to build on top of what Stefano and what Abel's organizations are developing. And that will, in my mind, convince a lot of the service providers they need to go there. They're already being targeted by government to meet sustainability targets. Radio, we know, is one of the biggest headaches in their networks today. If we look at innovation around of how innovative solutions leveraging the Open RAN architecture can drive energy efficiency, that could be a good carrot and stick effect for adoption. And I think there's lots of areas like that, but it needs an ecosystem, and we need to foster that ecosystem.
I think that's absolutely right, and trying to supercharge that ecosystem is the most important, I think, way that government is trying to derive benefits that are sort of long-lasting and sustainable, rather than trying to sort of pick relatively narrow aspects. Roger, I wonder if you have any thoughts on what more government could be doing, or how the existing schemes are actually working out in practice.
So from my point of view, look, Red Hat is more about open. Okay, so open source is our DNA. So, and we are quite focused on bringing more and more partners on the table and to have more innovation that we can offer to our end customer. Now, the vertical cloud or vertical deployment model, which was in the past, is not existing anymore. So with Open RAN, we are more talking about the horizontal cloud platforms for any use cases and literally any platform. From our point of view, we have been quite active in the telco infra project, which is basically a practical organization building the lab exercises, the POC on Open RAN, 5G, and the new radio, and O-RAN alliances, which is more around the architecture and open interfaces. So if the government starts getting involved in more in these initiatives, that could help the new vendors to look and start investing their resources in this area. Otherwise, for any new vendor, it's a big investment when it comes to like the R&D, engineering costs, and developing anything new.
Mm. Stefano, any thoughts? You were nodding. I think sort of it feels like they're quite sensible points that Raj just made that would work across the industry.
Yeah, again, I think all the points touched are absolutely valid. I think here we all have contributed to this kind of diversification. So we have been talking about it quite a long time. What I wanted to add is two things very quickly. One is praise, of course, to the activities done, because as I said, I think UK is definitely one of the leaders in this space, without any doubt. And I see, as we heard, the competition, more suppliers, even smaller supplier. At the fact that you have addressed the Open RAN widely, also in like G7, G10, G20, whatever it is, the innovation for competition, the interoperability lab, I think that's a big potential. I think if you could also start to look at some sort of, the government can start to look at some sort of certification. It doesn't have to be proof that everything works 100%, but it's like, give it like MOT, right? With MOT, you don't prove that the car is 100% perfect, but you give some guidelines and some check that actually is fit for purpose to go on the road. The same could be for Open RAN. There are, though, a couple of things that more can be done in that space, and this is really related at the nature of the technology that we are talking about. And I just wanted to mention three. One is more generic, and I think Abel has mentioned that, more incentive, but more incentive related to achievement, or like power efficiency or tax benefit if you roll out a certain amount of technology, rather than just giving money, which we have seen that giving money sometimes is not in the right direction. And I think US government had demonstrated that they gave money and the money went always to the usual legacy vendor. Well, instead, I think Japan has adopted some tax benefit things, which I think has been quite positive. But the other two are more interesting to me. One is government can actually do a bit more on a security framework for virtualization. To my knowledge, there is not a specific framework to refer to when we talk of virtualization in the security for government. And I think that will help because some operators still are saying, well, there's not a specific virtualization framework. So they question a lot. They bring a lot of questions about it. And the second thing is because 5G is about building more sites and densifying with non-conventional sites, I think government needs to look a bit more into help with permits, with access, maybe some sort of guidelines in the business of site rentals and landlords and so on. Again, some control, not a full marked prices for that, but more a control environment where you start to give some guidelines that if you add the cable, you're not going to charge 200% more just because you added the cable. I think these three areas, tax incentive for proper achievement, virtualization security framework, and access to site in order to increase the density of the site for non-traditional, but more open and simplify with just a small radius and so on. Those will be areas where I believe everybody will definitely benefit in this space.
Interesting, and I think I suppose the good news, if you like, is that they're certainly all areas that government is very much aware of, looking into, trying to address. The bad news is that the reason they're still issues is because they're complicated, right? And I think there's a lot of that to work through. Francesca, I wonder if you had any thoughts on this, and also just one of the questions that came up in the chat: when customers are looking at this, how much do they worry about changes to the security risk of what we're talking about doing today?
Yeah, I'll first add on the topic of what government should do more. And I think enough has been done already in terms of technology, also developing the ecosystem. And I wonder whether maybe having an approach which is more use case driven to try and drive adoption and show that we can have TCO optimization, not only for the rural deployment, but also for enterprise deployment, for enabling the smart vertical application, because I know there are open questions. Can we use Open RAN also as an optimized deployment tool for enterprise as well as for rural deployment or densification deployment as well? So I think trying to have some funding initiative to really enable to show the value of the business case of ORAN, I think is important. Now, I think on the security part, this is really a complex question because what we need to realize is that, as the network becomes more open, disaggregated, distributed, and even API driven, we are going to have more security challenges. And I think we have lots of open questions to answer, but we also have an opportunity to leverage the UK 5G test bed that we have around the country to really define best practice per use case, where we consider requirement not only from an IT layer, but also from an OT layer. And those are the main questions that enterprise ask, because as the wireless, as 5G becomes immersive in the operational layer to try and really innovate their business and operational activity to transform themselves, they are a bit worried in terms of security. And I think we need to look at it even holistically, because it's really about to look at the security across the entire ICT stack, as we talk about, digital services. So we need to secure the infrastructure, the connectivity, the platform, and the application. So even when it comes to security, I think bringing together the entire ecosystem is important. From a service provider perspective, as I mentioned, we are seeing enterprise asking us the convergence of offering between connectivity and security. And that's why, for example, as part of our telco cloud, we are also offering security as a services, and as part of the VNF marketplace, we're offering security VNF, giving the possibility to our customer to really spin off security services at the edge or at the core according to their security posture. So I think that is important. They also want to see us to move towards an AI-driven security operational model where we use telemetry for threat monitoring and then AI for threat detection, and that will help us to be, more proactive and also more reactive.
It's interesting. One question again, sort of from the chat, is a lot of what people are talking about where the real possibilities lie are in private networks, though, aren't they? Which are not regulated in the same way. I wonder what you would see as the threats or the opportunities from increasing government interest in regulating those sorts of private networks. That might be one for Francesca as well. But should we start with you, and then we'll see what.
Yeah, I'm sure Steve will have something to say, because I did a panel with him, and but I think whether we should have some regulation, or if it's more really for me, try and define best practice through, for example, the UK 5G security group, which Sparent is part of it, Colt is part of it. I think it's more about try and define the security best practice to bring the ecosystem together, to use those test beds even as a learning sharing platform, or even as an R&D platform to really enable to stimulate the innovation into the security and enable smaller player without R&D capability to experiment. So there are lots of initiatives that we're doing as part of the UK 5G. And we are also working collaborative with other groups in UK 5G. So I think, there is a lot to come.
And Stefano, how would you feel about the increased regulation of private networks versus making sure best practice is simply sort of mainstream? You're on mute, Stefano.
Yes, sorry. For once I muted, then a boomerang back. I think I think that regulation sometimes comes with some burden, and and some of the operators we see, they say, oh, we paid for licenses, we got this, we got that, and encage a bit of the whole thing. I do believe that some regulation are, of course, needed in the space of the frequencies, of the interference, and so on, because that is definitely something that is important. Because otherwise, we're going to get in a messy world more than what it is today. But I would say that we don't want to overload the private networks with regulations, because otherwise the result will be that they are caged, and they will not be able to get the agility and the speed that actually characterize that. So, for example, in the operator business, recently, if you look at what operator can do for the private business, for the enterprises, it always goes down to a long time to provide any type of services, which goes from the 18 to 24 months. Well, instead, now the enterprises and say, well, I can build it myself, or I can use the neutral hosting things. And that comes down to like 4 months, maybe, depending, of course, on the specific case. So I would say that some regulation is needed, especially in the spectrum, the frequency interference, and those kind of things. But as far as I don't think really much is needed, because, that will drive the different needs of the enterprises, and we don't want to cage them in too many complex regulation. That really would be my view and experience. Matt, we're still suffering from some of the emergency call regulations that are in place, for which we still need to utilize circuit switch technology or so on, just because of that, after 20, 30 years that actually we have done those regulations. So I think it's time to look at what is really needed, and trying to make it not so heavy or cage the people who are trying to do business and trying to do it in an innovative way.
Yeah, and it's the perennial balance, isn't it? And obviously, the government is keen on as lighter touch regulation as possible, but security is still always going to be hugely important. And as private networks play a greater part proportionally in what we're looking at, then it's going to be an interesting balance, isn't it? But certainly, from my own perspective, then that light touch is how you foster innovation, I think. Abel, you're nodding.
Yes. Yeah, I think, well, looking at private networks, I think that the UK and Ofcom did a great job. I think I would say it's the leading country on private networks. I think it's one of the unique countries that provides sub-6 frequencies spectrum, but also millimeter wave. This is quite unique, right? This is a booming market that we see. We have many opportunities in the UK, different verticals, from car connectivity, manufacturing, and so on. And looking at the security aspect, I agree totally with Stefano and Francesca. I think that regulations, are well positioned. For example, when you touch the ambit of public, like for example the frequencies, as Stefano was mentioning, you don't have to allow to interfere someone else. So that's why you have to have some regulations there on the power you can transmit, the position of the radios, and so on. But when you go to security, I think the important thing here is not the regulation, is to have these best practices guidelines. And in order to apply these best practices guidelines, you need an architecture that is transparent enough, where you can set up at the highest security level, but also validate them, right? And this is the importance of this new architecture, right? With these interfaces that are standardized and they are transparent. So that means that a private network customer can know precisely, they can set the level of security and validate that this security is there. There is no backdoor threats. The data that they are very, it's very important for private networks, remains, for example, in premises, and they don't travel, outside the network, right? So these things are possible when you create this open infrastructure. But I agree that, I think it's better to use guidelines than regulations for private network security.
Steve or Roger, conscious of time, but any thoughts? I don't hear a clamour from industry for more regulation.
Well, I don't think it's about regulation. I think it's about recommendations from them and guidance. I mean, I think there's an elephant in the room we tend to a little bit forget, is that when we look at enterprises for private networks, most of us are always straight away think of big enterprises. But like here in the UK, over I think about 99% of enterprises are SMEs. You look at those environments, most of them are indoor environments. Most of them, it's not all about 5G, it's actually Wi-Fi as well. There's lots of connectivity options there. And I think they need recommendations of, what is the optimal environments for them. And we as an industry need to provide them something which is easily to consume and secure if we're going to get SMEs to really start adopting it. I think there's a huge opportunity which actually COVID has created. I mean, a lot of the SMEs we engage with today are now looking at private networks as a real option for them, because they're looking for connectivity to help them deal with what they've had to go through. They want that efficiencies, they want that agility that suddenly COVID sort of brought or accelerated on them. And I think we as an industry need to think about that a little bit more. It's not just about the 1 or 2%, the big industries, it's also about the SMEs out there. And they really need those clear guidelines and recommendations that then get fed back into the ecosystem and say, this is what you need to provide. And I think it is also the ecosystem. I mean, I don't personally believe a single service provider can service the whole SME environment. This is where you need to have collaboration with lots of specialist players. And we're seeing quite a bit of success in this in certain other markets like Switzerland at the moment, where a lot of the service providers are starting to build these ecosystems with very niche, smaller system integrators that specifically focus in on those smaller enterprise market segments and developing that sort of package of that simple solution that can be used for them. And I think that's sort of an area I think the UK needs to sort of really focus in on over the next few years, because otherwise we're missing a huge opportunity with the SME community.
No, interesting. Roger, I'll come to you. And then I was sort of wondering if, given that we've talked an awful lot about diversification, actually there is that sort of broader, how do we develop genuinely holistic connectivity that sort of addresses what you were just saying, Steve, about sort of into where it doesn't matter whether it's Wi-Fi or 4G or 5G, people just care that it works, kind of thing. And I think integrating that into something genuinely seamless is an interesting proposition. But Roger, on this, any thoughts?
Look, broadly, we all agree that we need to find a fine balance between how much regulation we want when we talk about the innovation. So it's in general, we agree that it should be a very fine balance. But private 5G going forward would be a big thing. So we work across the industries. So we are working with the defense in UK. We are working with the harbor stuff. So we need to find like how we can innovate or how we can bring more and more use cases around it. So for example, we were discussing with our customers, especially around how we can reduce the loss of humans when it comes to the building maintenances or the bridges. So that's one. The second is like how we can innovate the healthcare sector using smart healthcare and smart cities. So there are a lot of potential in this area. And we need to give, I would say, enough platform for the new companies, new application developers to come in and showcase those applications and probably the use cases which can be used for the wider good.
And do you think that meaningfully that sort of diversification is what will allow the seamless integration of whether it's satellites, whether it's new 5G technology that is much more pervasive in indoor settings as well as outdoor settings, or all that sort of stuff? Is there a sort of, is it that openness that really drives the kind of integration that will allow really holistic connectivity? And how far away are we from something like that? There's a sort of the 2030 vision, 2040 vision, or whatever it might be. Does that feel like Britain is on the right track? I wonder if maybe I'll start with Stefano, and as I say, conscious of time. So your very short version of how do we get to the best version of 2030? And you'll have to unmute again.
Becoming a bad habit. I think that innovations is fostered by competition. So competition is the key point. All these things happens only with competition. And I know that it sounds a bit like a slogan, but the reality is that when you have just few players, they tend to just sit down and play with what they have. And we have seen this for some references. So definitely the competitions is so important to get to the point. From technology point of view, it's clear that the convergence of technology is going to be there. I think 5G has a particular role because of some characteristics that also are very suitable for industry, what they call Industry 4.0 and so on, and to replace some of the old legacy systems that they have. But it is going to always be a mix of access technology that are all convergent towards this core. That's why we as Marvin, for example, we say a single network, a one network on any cloud and all software. That's what it really means. So I have no doubt that the vision is that, and it will be boosted and fueled by competition, which means innovation.
And Francesca, does that ring true with your experiences as well? Because obviously Colt comes from a different historic background.
It does. What we're seeing is that the access technology and the access services are becoming more diversified. We have the fixed connectivity Colt, we have the Wi-Fi, fixed wireless access from 5G, we have the satellites, the LEO. So what we are trying to do is to develop a vision of network as a platform where it has three key capabilities. First, it becomes an aggregation platform. We can aggregate all those data. Then we can add security layer on top, leveraging our partnership with security vendors, but also our edge-centric network. And third, we want to become an interconnection. We want to expand the interconnection capability, giving access to the enterprise, to a digital ecosystem, to the marketplace, platform, SaaS marketplace. And I think that will deliver the benefit of this diversification of technology, market, and deployment.
Interesting. And Abel, does that chime with what you see at Airspan as well?
Totally. We see a converging in technologies from traditional mobile networks moving to fixed wireless access, private networks connected also the need to public networks. We're talking about satellites. We are in a project with Telecom Infra project related to placing 4G, 5G radios in low orbit satellites. Wi-Fi is something that is there and it has many benefits, right? So it's a technology that is going to remain, and of course it has to converge with 5G, right? In order to do so, what you need is to have these open platforms that they can see these access technologies as a whole, right? Like this management system that can see this access and then simplify it for the end customer, right? This is something that we can see using, for example, Open RAN, something that, for example, one of the projects in ECMS, 5G in code, we're working with a company called CETA, and basically what they're trying to do is to merge the movement of from a private network to a public network, right? Using our airspan solution, right? The software and the hardware in 5G. And this is the way forward. And the only way you can do that is if you start using these open interfaces and also using to virtualize this infrastructure, right? In order to manage these resources, right? These software defined networks. So I totally agree. This is the future of the mobile networks.
And Raja, obviously, again, a different perspective, but software is crucial to that integration piece, isn't it?
Definitely, that's one of the most important pieces, because talking purely from the deployment model point of view, you might have some requirement indoors, outdoors, private cloud, public cloud. So you need to have, I would say, firstly, a platform which can support all these requirements. Red Hat has been quite involved with building the reference architecture with various partners. So Red Hat has partners across the industry in order to design and assemble more comprehensive framework. And we have been putting a lot of effort in Kubernetes-based platforms, especially for the network core, RAN, and as well as edge computing workload. Also, we talk about what are the future advancements in Open RAN. We are talking about RAN intelligent controller, open front haul, telemetry, network slicing, metrics. A lot of new features would be coming, and there's a need to have a platform which can deliver those functionalities, including zero-touch provisioning for the new apps.
Steve, what would you add to that? Conscious of time, try and squeeze one more question at the end as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the platform becomes sort of let's call it the safety net for, you need an open platform to allow any future convergence. But my only comment would be, at the same time, we don't need to do convergence for convergence sake as well. And that's the bit of the risk. We also have to understand the business case of when and why you would want to do convergence for what types of environments. But because you have an open platform behind it, you have that flexibility to do that. And I think that's going to be critical. I mean, it's like take satellite for the moment. There's lots of things we could do with low Earth orbit satellites, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the most beneficial or the most cost efficient way to do it. And we just need to understand that and be open about that, and then realize, because at the end of the day, we want to offer the best of breed capabilities to customers, say, for here in the UK. And I think that's an open platform enables it, but you don't have to just go and say, well, now we've got it, everything has to be converged. It's understanding when and why you'd want to do it.
No, it's an interesting point. And the last question I was going to end on, which will have to be a rapid fire version, was to ask sort of once all of this stuff that we've been talking about has been achieved, what do you feel is the sort of the killer app that, or not literally an app, obviously, that is going to be so compelling for whether it's customers or whether it's consumers? What's that one end goal that we could be thinking of ourselves as aiming for? I'm going to pick on Stefano first, and the good news is you've only got 15 seconds to do it.
Yeah, there is no killer app, Matt. Sorry, I'm learning through all the G technologies, generation, and so on. I think it's an ecosystem. I think it's capability, and the innovation will tell us which is the app that is going to win, or the set of apps that are going to win. We can provide the tools. Someone, I'm sure, will come up with the real capabilities. But AI and machine learning are very promising at the moment. In that space, there's a lot to come.
Almost a politician's answer. Francesca, any thoughts?
Well, I'm going to answer in similar line with along Stefano. I think innovation will tell and time will tell. It's important to create that capability and that ecosystem that then will give the tool to the enterprise to innovate and bring some innovative and transformative use case. There are some verticals that may be more ready than others, like manufacturing, but I think the other application in retail, in media, in healthcare will come along.
Raja, and then I'll come to Steve and then Abel.
I will probably answer on the same lines. There's no killer app. Main intention should be like getting a platform ready, which is secure in nature, which is open enough for other companies to come and build the application, leverage the AI ML models, and get meaningful information which is relevant for the business model as well as for the end customer.
Steve.
I think it's a killer outcome, and the killer outcome is sustainability. I think if we enable connectivity with AI into industries like oil, gas, transportation, we can help them meet their CO2 emission targets. I think that is the real killer application of connectivity in those environments, not in itself. And I think that's what we should really strive towards.
And finally, Abel.
I think the killer app is that 5G can meet all service level agreements, means that you can have connected cars, private networks, bringing low latency, high throughputs, massive type of communications. I think this is the killer app of 5G. It's an enabler for many killer apps.
Fantastic. Thank you. Definitely consensus that the ecosystem and sustainability is the killer app, and also possibly the fact that if anyone knows what the killer app is, then they certainly wouldn't be talking about it in a public forum before they'd launched it to enormous profitability. I will hand back to that, but thank you to all of the panelists for what I think has been a really interesting discussion on a topic that will be with us for a long time to come, but certainly is in a period of enormous change. So thank you to everyone, and back with that to Matt. Thank you.